Hello and welcome to Sasha Says. I'm Sasha Gardner and I'm so excited to have you here with me as I embark on this new chapter. In this podcast, I'm speaking to incredible people who will be sharing their stories and expertise, and I hope that will help inspire you and help you on your journey. Please also don't forget to press the follow button, like, comment, and share with your friends. It's a small thing for you, but a huge thing for us, and it really does help. Hi Tina, I just want to say a huge thank you for coming on today's show. We had a few technical issues before we started this recording, so I have to apologise about that. But I just want to say I'm really grateful to have you here today, and I'd really love it if you could just introduce yourself and just share a bit about your family, please.
Yeah, so I'm Tina. I live in East Yorkshire. I'm mum to 4 boys, ages between 8 and 16. And my second eldest son, Charlie, he's 14 and he was born with left-sided microtia. And we enjoy camping and caravan holidays and doing things like that together.
And when you first learned that Charlie had microtia, do you remember what you felt at that moment?
Yeah, so it was, obviously it was, well, not obviously, but as he was born, is when I first noticed he had a smaller ear. And it was, a bit of a shock. There was a lot more questions than answers. And it was never picked up on scans. We had extra scans with Charlie because he was going to be a small baby. He was actually the smallest out of the 4 that I had. And so we had all these extra scans. We had 4D scans, went for the private scans, and nothing was ever picked up about his ears. Obviously, it is a hard area to see, in scans. But it was just a shock, really. Never, seen this sort of thing before, or didn't have a name. The hospital didn't have a name. The midwives actually took him to show a doctor and, to get a sort of an opinion, but no one had any answers. So it was very new, confusing, and I resorted to having to go home and Google small ears to see what was going on, basically.
So you mentioned, Charlie's 12 now.
14.
He's 14 now, sorry.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it didn't show up in the scans. Have you ever heard of microtia ever showing up in anyone's scans?
No, but my thing was, after obviously having Charlie, when I had my third son, I did actually ask them to try and look at the ears as best they could. Obviously, typically it's not something they are going to look at because it's rare. But in hindsight now I can, if I was ever to have any more children, I can say, can you just have a look at the ears just out of interest? It wouldn't change a thing for me, but just to see if there's a potential that another baby will be born with microtia. So I suppose it's just one of the things where you think it should have been picked up on, but like you say, it's not going to be.
And so you've got 4 children. Do any of the other children have microtia, or is it just Charlie?
No, it's just Charlie. So none of them have got any type of hearing loss or, microtia or anything. We've got autism and ADHD in the family, but not anything to do with, facial, or hearing, that side of things.
You're having a child, the baby pops out. It's all really overwhelming anyway and exciting at the same time. You notice that Charlie does have microtia. How did that make you feel as a parent?
See, for me, it didn't change anything. I still loved him all the same. It was just hard because people had questions for me and I didn't have the answers in them early days. And that was a bit daunting for me and a bit scary. I was young as well. I mean, still young, but, still was young. And it was, but it was a scary time because I didn't know what to say to people. And especially, it's not so bad when it's family and friends because I think they understand and you can, talk to them more in depth about it all. But when it's strangers in, shops and people looking and staring or, saying things like, oh, what's happened? And I'm like, I don't know, and people just look at you like you're silly. Like, well, I don't know because I've not got the answers from the professionals yet, so it's sort of, I'm saying, I think it's microtia. It's what I've Googled, but I still had no answers until he was 1 month old. So it was that tricky sort of period, I guess, of trying to navigate a world that I wasn't even sure I was in the right world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and this is why this particular episode is incredibly important because we haven't actually done an episode where we've brought on a parent, with a child of microtia. And one of the things that always comes up whenever I'm speaking to people about microtia is this, from a parent's perspective, because being a new mum is one thing, but then having all these questions and no answers is, it can be probably quite isolating. And then if you do go onto Google, I know this is obviously 14 years ago, but you probably still went down some kind of rabbit hole. And what did the hospital say to you? Did they offer you any kind of support?
No, it was, basically they couldn't do his hearing test because they didn't have anything small enough to go in the smaller ear to sort of test his hearing. So they said we would receive an appointment in the post to go to my local hospital. I think that was, off the top of my head, 2 or 3 weeks after he was born. And then it was about a month later when we actually went to like another sort of audiologist, but in Hull, where it's, they've got more services to where I live. And that's when they confirmed, yes, he has got microtia. Here's a leaflet about hearing loss and how the inner ear works and, bone conduction. But I didn't know about the charity, I still had no idea. And that was that really, sort of left to our own devices for a little while. We had regular appointments, the hemifacial microsomia team as well, and sort of plastics and this sort of thing. But it was more like, he's doing okay. We'll see you again in a few months. And can we bring these students in to come and see your baby because they're learning? Also, I was quite happy for them too, but it's still very daunting, to have all these people sort of podding and croaking and it's all these new words, the terminology, all these words that they're saying. I've never even seen a hearing aid at that point, face to face. None of our family had hearing aids. So it's sort of a whole new world that you feel like you're stepping into and having to basically look online.
Yeah. And, one of the I'm part of a few Microtia groups, and some of the things that I've read, which I find it's actually, it makes me feel quite sad, is that new parents with babies of Microtia, it's great that they find these support groups, but there's an element of them blaming themselves because I see the things that they write. In your experience now, is there anything that you could pinpoint that would cause it that you know of? I know that obviously you're not the expert as in the doctor, but anything that you're aware of that could cause, and by the way, this isn't on our list of questions, I'm just really curious because on the comments that I've read, it's like I was taking these supplements or I was taking this medication and maybe that caused it or maybe it didn't. And did that go through your mind as well? Was it me? Did I do something?
Yeah, I did sort of question if there was anything that I potentially had have done, but I knew exactly, I'm not a smoker. I don't take any sort of, like supplements or I avoid tablets as much as I can unless I've got an actual migraine. I just don't, I don't take anything. So I knew nothing had happened in that sense, which made it in some ways more confusing because would it have been easier for me to try and pinpoint something? Maybe. It's hard to say, isn't it? But there was nothing at all that, there was no reason. And the fact that I knew I'd had so many scans where I just in my mind thought somebody would have seen this, surely, and he had a large skin tag hanging off his, his cheek at the time as well. I'm like, how was this not picked up? Or that's the sort of the question. I tried not to blame myself, I guess. I just focused on now, and not really pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Charlie has right-sided microtia, or is it left-sided?
Left-sided.
So he's left side, and then you said the skin tag was on his cheek.
Yeah, on his left cheek, yeah.
And you've had your son, you've been given a leaflet from the NHS which says come back in a few months. You've gone onto Google, there's not much on there. You've been asked your friends, and when you have a baby, everyone wants to see the newborn baby, and you're proudly showing off your new baby, and you're getting all these questions. And you haven't got the answers to give. So you're probably feeling quite overwhelmed. At what point did you then meet the Microtia UK Charity?
It just popped in my head one day to type Microtia into Facebook just to see if there was anyone else out there with Microtia, because even though I'd Googled it, I couldn't see anything like local or there was nothing coming up at the time. And then that's when I stumbled across the support group, quickly added that, got accepted in and realised there was a whole load of people around the UK that had, either microtia themselves or children with microtia. And that was eye-opening to me. It was like, wow, there's others out there. It's not just me. And that was a nice feeling that I wasn't alone, but I still felt alone to a degree because in my area, I felt like I was still the only one here. And there was no one down the road that I could talk to. It felt like everyone was still a couple of hours drive away. But it was nice to connect, to be able to message, ask questions, introduce myself to the group type thing and be like, hello, I'm a parent, please guide me. What do I, is there anything I need to do? And just just having that support. I think I just felt welcomed straight away, and that helped.
Did you feel alone and isolated
Yeah.
in that moment?
Yeah, I think in that first year, I'm not afraid to say it was hard. I felt overwhelmed. I think it's difficult, even just going from one baby to two. I found that alone a difference, to love my first son and then to be like, oh, now I have to share this love with boy number two. I was like, how do I do this? That was a big thing for me. So then having born with a condition that I had no idea existed, what it meant for his future, all these questions buzzing around my head about, will he be okay? Will he be bullied? Will he find love? Will he speak okay? Can he hear me okay? And no one can really answer them questions until he grows and develops. And that waiting, it's that waiting game. That first year was hard. I think I struggled with what best to do, who to speak to and what to do. And it took, I think, a good part of that year to, really sort of accept everything, understand the new lingo and really come to terms with it. I think it affected me more than I realised at the time. And I think it's something you can look back on and think, it was hard. It was a lot to take on. And we still have the parents that come into the charity now where, some really embrace it and they're fine. And some do need that support because it's just a lot to take on sometimes.
Do you think finding the Microtia Mingle group at that time really helped you in your experience?
Yeah, it definitely made me feel less alone. That was the main thing for me. I just felt like I was the only one. I had no idea, never seen anybody myself with a smaller ear. It's nothing I've ever noticed. Or my husband, anyone in the family even, when we asked them, have you ever noticed anything like this with somebody else? No, it's... Yeah.
And have you ever thought about any of the surgical options or your view on those things?
Yeah, so when he was born, actually I was like, I heard about the reconstruction and I thought, that's the route we'll go down and we can fix it. And now in hindsight, I don't believe it's something that needs to be fixed. I love his little ear and we're actually sad for him to get it removed. However, he's come to me and said he would like a reconstruction. So he's on the waiting list now with Neil Bulstrode to have that reconstruction. He's also had the skin tag removed when he was 1. He kept pulling at it all the time. He had the barbara tract surgery done when he was 6, and he had the fat removal taken from his thighs into his cheek to sort of, make the face a bit more symmetrical and plump out that Microtia side. Yeah.
So I know with Microtia, it can affect one side of your face if you've got it on one side. So he had fat removal and then put in the side of his face.
Yes, it's taken from both of his thighs, the sort of inner thighs, because his stomach he's not plump enough. He's quite sporty, so if not, they would have taken it from his stomach. So they then popped it in his Microtia side of the face, along with some Botox to help his smile lift, together. So Botox around the lips, and he had a skin pit, they call it, where it sort of dips in, where there's I suppose lack of bone and muscle and stuff there. So they filled that out as well. It has some of it sort of soaked back into his body, it's sort of reabsorbed. So he will need a second procedure done. So it's something they can do during reconstruction if, definitely goes ahead with that. All this time, he's been very, proud to be himself. I suppose the work I do with the charity, it's just how he's been with the charity. He's always been like, I love my little ear. I don't want to change it. And then it was this year he came to me and said, I've been thinking about my future and I'd like to have a reconstruction. And, obviously I follow his lead. We've always been very open and honest with Charlie about his options. And, if that's what he wants, I fully support him. I'll be sad because I love his ear, but, if that's what he wants, he comes first.
Yeah. And so he wants to do the rib cartilage reconstructive surgery.
Yes, yeah, at Great Ormond Street.
So with his hearing, so he's got the bone-anchored hearing aid on his left side. And then how old was he when he had that? He was 6?
6, yeah. So we actually went to a Microtia UK fun day when he was 5. It was our first one. And at this point, we'd been going to audiology every 6 months. And they've been saying, his other ear compensates, you don't need a hearing aid. And because I didn't know any better, I was just like, okay. And off I went. Then when we was at the London event and the hearing aid tables were there, that's when he tried on a bar half for the first time, and his eyes lit up and he's like, I can hear in 2 ears. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. What's it like? He's like, I can hear things that I couldn't hear before. And he was like, I want one. So at this point I went back to my audiologist and I said, can we get one to try? Surely there's no harm in trying. And they said, yeah. And I'm like, why did you not give us this before? Like, if it was an option, it was just, I think, funding. It literally differs from area to area around the UK, some are quite happy to give them out and will suggest it. Others seem to say, oh, you've got one ear, that works perfectly fine, so we won't give you anything. It should be the parents' option.
Does he have full hearing in his good ear?
Yeah, he has full hearing on his right, and then sort of moderate to severe hearing loss on his left.
And the bone anchored hearing aid has elevated that, so he's fully hearing.
Yeah, he was, and then he stopped wearing it at age 11. So he had the magnet, so he could just pop it on and off without the band at age 6. And then about age 11, he stopped wearing it just before secondary school. I think he just got to a more self-conscious age of how it looked. People touching it, maybe taking it off, and he's not really worn it properly since. So we still have it, but he knows it's there if he ever wants to go back to it. So he just copes in situations.
That was actually one of my next questions in terms of his experiences at school. And does he get bullied? Has he got a lot of friends? How is he socially?
Yeah, so he's always had lots of friends since he was little. Always had a lovely group of people around him. He's quite funny, comedian, likes to make a lot of jokes. Really been accepted by, his peers. His school, and they've helped support and do fundraisers actually for Microtia UK. And then at secondary school, he did get bullied for the first time. It was quite a bad experience. Wasn't nice. We had to get the police involved. Threatening to do really nasty things to him. But we managed to squash that. The boy was excluded, and it was solved quite quickly, luckily. I did worry, would that affect him? But he was okay. He bounced back. He's quite resilient and confident, and it didn't bother him, luckily.
It always breaks my heart when I hear these types of stories about bullying. I know that children don't just get bullied for Microtia. Children are just children, aren't they? They bully each other for everything. Yeah. But it's never a nice experience for the child. And like you said, sometimes one experience like that can actually affect a lot more things and how you act and how you feel and your perspective on lots of different things. So I'm glad that you said that he is resilient. And that's one of the good things about Microtia. I feel that it does give you a lot of resilience. I wanted to talk to you, Tina, because the listeners and the viewers, I'm sure they've gauged kind of more about you. But one of the things, and this is how you and I met, is through the Microtia UK Charity. And you spend a lot of time advocating for Microtia and making time for other people to reassure them and help them and educate them with something that you didn't have, which is amazing. You've been part of that now. Is it 7 years you've been part of the Microtia UK Charity?
Yeah, just over 7 years now. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's gone quite quickly.
I had the pleasure of coming to, actually it was last weekend, wasn't it, to one of the Microtia, the biggest, it's the event in the UK, and it was really quite amazing. I've never been in a room with so many people with Microtia, because I'm sure if people are listening, they know the stats, but it is 1 in 10,000. And, to walk in and it just feel like family was quite amazing. And that's all thanks to you, Tina, because, you're consistently giving up your time to advocate for this. You said right at the start of, our conversation that there were so many moments when you felt alone and on your own in this situation. And I wanted just to talk about what the Microtia Charity offers for people with Microtia, without Microtia, the support. If you could just talk about that would be amazing.
When I joined the charity, working for them 7 years ago, a lot of things needed updating and needed someone to really sort of carry the charity forward, keep it going, keep things running over, not just with fundraising, but updating the website, our leaflets, brochures, etc. So in this whole time, that's what we've been doing. We've created children's books. We've created new resources, fully update the website and keep it up to date, and obviously send out things that people purchase. Just helps them feel that they're not alone. And it's just nice to have these things where, like, oh, that elephant teddy, that looks like me, it's got a small ear, little things like that just really help, especially children, to feel not alone. We at the charity support not just those born with Microtia, but their families as well. Set up a phone line so they can, it comes through to myself. So, I can speak to them, I can share my experiences. give advice. If I don't have the answer to the question, I will try and find that answer and chase that up. And just making a community, I think, is the most important thing, just so that everyone knows that they've got each other. And having like the big event, like the London event, is, you know, one of our important days where everyone can come together and just spend time together and have a nice time, talk and listen. And I think that's one of the most important things, just literally being there. It's not just me, there's the trustees as well that are part of, you know, the decision making within the charity. I just like to think that I'm there for anyone who needs me, you know, whether, like I say, it's a fundraiser, whether it's just to hold an event, or whether it's just to have a natter on the phone. You know, I'm there to speak to them and to make them not feel alone like I did when I felt alone when he was first born.
Tina, I wanted to ask you, for someone listening who has just learnt that their child has been born with microtia, what advice would you give them?
So I'd like to think, I think one of the most things that I usually say when people get in touch is I say, everything will be okay. Because when I heard them words from actually Matthew English, when he did a speech back at the first event that I went to, I cried because I needed to hear that everything was going to be okay. So yeah, that's one of the things I would say. Everything will be fine. Don't worry. I know it's easy to stress, overthink things, worry about their future, but I promise everything will be fine. And that
I'm getting tearful.
Oh, no. And that you're not alone. You know, that's the other thing. You know, you're not on your own. We are here all the time. I'm always here 24/7. I don't care what time it is. I'm here if somebody needs me. And that's what is usually, you know, the first things I tell people when they do get in touch. Even if they're abroad, to be honest, we get a lot of people from abroad as well that get in touch. They don't have that support network. They don't have that charity set up. So I'm quite happy. I still talk to them. I don't brush them aside because I can't support them. I think, well, I can, because I can give that emotional support and just share that. I have a son too. This is what he's like. Send a picture of him. I'm quite happy to just communicate with them. I'll even do Google Translate and send it, you know, in their language so they can understand.
Yes, that's what I do as well.
Best as you can, isn't it? And this is it. You try and it's nice, I think, just to reach out to them and just be like, I'm sorry that we can't do X, Y, Z, but I can talk to you and I can tell you that you're not on your own, and please don't worry about your son or your daughter. You know, they'll be okay. So, you know, you get a lot of people that worry. And I think we've got enough worries going on in the world than to have this.
And they say a problem shared is a problem halved. And sometimes it's literally just speaking to someone and connecting to someone who really understands because they've been there themselves. And just that alone, I feel, is really helpful and really reassuring to hear the words, like you said, everything will be okay, to someone who's been in this. And it could just be for 6 months, it could be a month, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is that in that moment, they feel so overwhelmed and they're not getting the answers and the support. So just to connect with someone and hear those words, I think is just really crucial. In terms of when parents reach out to you and they ask you certain things and they ask for your advice because you've been there yourself, do you find a lot of them ask you about the reconstructive surgery and what would you do? I feel like parents are really stuck with that particular part around the microtia because some parents, they don't want to do anything. Some parents, they do, and they're sort of stuck in that predicament. Do you find that you get that quite a lot?
Yeah, I'd say probably about half would mention sort of that point. Initially, it's sometimes more just about the hearing and on audiology side of things in the early days, but some do mention, what about reconstruction? How old can they do it? Has your son had it done? Would I recommend it? And that sort of thing. And I always say, ultimately, it has to be the child's choice. They have to be on board with it. We can't force them. If it's early days, I would say just to think about it, because my opinion changed. You know, initially I was all like, yes, yes, yes. And then I was like, no, I'm quite happy to sit back and let him be. He's doing really well in life. He did so many fantastic things when he was younger. Now he's a stroppy teenager. But when he was younger, he was lovely and doing all these wonderful things. And I just think sometimes it's nice just to wait and see what the child wants. But ultimately, the decision has to be, you've got to support them and what they want. And if they do want it, let them do that. Just make sure it's for them and not for anybody else, because they're, feeling pressure from peers or being bullied. I'd hate for them to, for like Charlie, I'd hate him to do it because he's trying to please other people and fit in. I want it to be, that's what he definitely wants for himself.
Last week at the Microtia charity event, I forgot to tell you, it was really nice because after I did my talk, a few people came up and said, "Oh, Sasha, I just wanted to say we love the podcast." And I said, "Oh, you're the first person in real life who's actually come up and said that. That's really nice to hear." Because I said, "Oh, sometimes I might be sat here and feel, oh, no one's listening anyway, or it's not really helping," but apparently it really does help. So
Yeah.
these types of conversations, and even when I was speaking to them, a lot of people will ask me, "What do you think about surgery?" And I sort of say exactly the same as you. And also some of the people that have been on the podcast they've said things like, if I'd worked on my mental health first, there's a case in point that I wouldn't have even considered having the surgery, because they might have done exactly what you just said and done it for the wrong reasons, because, to please other people, versus actually thinking, what do I really want? And so I think that's one of my takeaways from doing this podcast, is that I learned that, that you have to make sure that you're doing it for yourself, not for other people.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
So if people are listening, they're based in the UK and they're new to this podcast and they don't know anything about it, and they've got maybe a child with microtia, or they know someone with a child with microtia and they would like to direct them, can you talk just a bit about that, so that they know what happens, where they can go, how to reach out, what you guys offer, and how to get involved as well?
Yeah, so the London event itself is a big event that we hold once a year. It's always in June. And we've had it at the same venue as well every year. And it's a really lovely day where we try and hold like speakers in the morning. So that'll be from medical professionals to those born with microtia, children and adults sharing their experiences. And sometimes we have like the parents speak as well, like we did last week. And at the same time, while that is all going on, outside we've got amazing activities for the kids just to go and run wild, go bouncing on the trampolines and the climbing wall and bouncy castles. And there's, we have lots going on. We had to move some of it indoors this year because of the potential rain, but usually it's all out on the field. And we have workshops. So, for example, we've got like football, robotics, art, all these different things going on, whilst the parents can just sit and listen to the speakers. And we have a fantastic team called Rising Stars who help sort the kids out and organise where they need to be and look after them. So, and food and drink are provided throughout the day. And we've got the hearing aid companies that are really important. They're our sponsors, Oticon, Medel and Cochlear, who have tables. We can look at the latest hearing aid technology. And we had the National Deaf Children Society, and we had Baha Accessories UK, who provide like the bands and some of it, like types of books and teddies. So it's just a really nice day, and that's our big event. We have obviously smaller sort of, we call them mingles, where people can get together, they can organise their own. We try and organise one or two. We've had like things at the Space Centre, West Midlands Safari Park, things like that. Just try and, Scotland, we've just try and get things together. And we have a lovely lady over in Ireland who helps organise the Irish ones. So it's just nice. If anyone wants to come along, they can get in touch with the charity, just drop an email, ask if there's any events coming up, and we can obviously let them know. If they would like to be involved, they can join the Microtia Mingle support group. We're across social media, YouTube, LinkedIn. We usually use Facebook as our main page, that where I definitely post on there and try and post on all the others because it's just me trying to post it all out. They can always get in touch with me if they've got questions, if they need parent guide, booklets, anything like that. I can send them out for free to families and make them feel supported.
So what's the name of the page on Facebook?
The support group is Microtia Mingle UK.
Okay, so I can link that in the show notes below. Also the website. And if they want to get in contact with you directly, should they go through the charity, or what's the best way of contacting you, Tina?
Yeah, so they can either email the info@microtiauk.org, because that will come to me anyway, or if they want it just to come to me direct, it's tina@microtiauk.org.
And also the website's amazing. I had a little look myself. You've got all the links to various different pieces of information, audiologists and all about Microtia, people's stories. So it's really informative. Tina, I want to say a huge thank you today for your time, for coming on and sharing about your journey and sharing about the charity that you're involved with, and just for the incredible work that you do, because it's really wonderful for people to feel support. Because I know that when I say I started my Microtia journey, it did feel quite isolating, and I know it was the same for you. So I'm sure that that's just a feeling that everyone has, and having platforms like yours is just really helpful and encouraging, and more importantly supportive, so people don't have to feel alone. So I wanted to say thank you to you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me and let me share my journey. And if people do want to get in touch, or want to know more, then I'm an open book. I'm feel free to get in touch, and I'm quite happy to speak to anyone.
I will link everything that we've discussed with Tina in terms of links and how to get in contact with her through the charity in the show notes below. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.